All right, here's questions 12 and 13 on the Unit 3 example question set. We are going to solve the quadratic equations here using the quadratic formula. First thing you got to know, it's got to be equal to 0. And if you'll notice here, we've got on number 12, we've got 2x squared minus 13x equals 7. Well, that's no good. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, so I get 2x squared minus 13x minus 7 equals 0. Now that I've done that, everything else is going to fall into place really quite simply. So a is going to be 2. I'm going to multiply both of those by 2. 2 times a is 2a. 2 times 2 is 4. So I have 2a equals 4. That'll come in handy here in a second. My b value is going to be negative 13. B squared then will be negative 13 squared. Let me just show you how I do that. Negative 13 in parentheses. And then the square is outside the parentheses. I get 169. My c value is negative 7. And then I want to know what 4ac is. That's going to be 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 7. I'm going to get negative 56. Cool. Next step, what is b squared minus 4ac? Well, b squared we know is 169 minus 4ac. 4ac is negative 56. Two negatives make a positive, by the way. So I get 169 plus 56. Whoops. 169 plus 56. That is 225. Boom. And then we have finally our quadratic formula. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we can plug in, which is awesome. So b is negative 13. The opposite of that then would be positive 13. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, which we know is 225. And then that's all divided by 2a. Well, 2a is 4. Then the next step is the square root 225. So second square root 225, and I get 15. So this becomes 13 plus or minus 15 over 4. So what are my answers? Well, let's plug them in. First, we're going to do 13 plus 15. I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm going to go divided by 4, and I'm going to hit enter, and I get 7. Now I'm going to do 13 minus 15. Enter. Divided by 4. Enter. And I get negative 0.5. Those are going to be my answers. Please make sure when you're doing the plus and the minus, you hit the enter first. If you don't want to, if you want to type it all in at once, that's fine. You can type 13 plus 15 divided by 4, but you have to put the top in parentheses. Otherwise, what will happen is it'll just divide the 15 by 4, and then you'll add 13. That's not so good. Anyway, that's 12. Let's check out 13. This one is already equal to 0, so I don't have to do any adjustment, which is great. A is 1, so 2a will be 2 times that, which is 2. B will be negative 10. B squared will be negative 10 squared, which is 100. If you don't believe me, check your calculator. C will be 61, and 4ac will be 4 times 1 times 61, which is 244. Then we go to the discriminant. B squared minus 4ac. That's going to be, let's see, b squared is 100. Minus 4ac is 244. So when I subtract that, I get negative 144. Oh, interesting. That means we're going to have two complex solutions. Let's go to our quadratic formula then. X is going to equal the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. B is negative 10. The opposite of that is positive 10. Plus or minus the square root of negative 144. And that's going to be over 2a, which is 2. So I substituted in. By the way, we did b squared minus 4ac right here. We got negative 144. Now the next move is always to take the square root here. So I get 10 plus or minus. I can't take the square root of negative 144. If you try in the calculator, oh, whoops, Second square root of negative 144. It's going to say, no way, Jose. See, no real answers. So what we have to do is be a little clever. We know that all negative square roots, all square roots really, can be written as the product of two numbers. And then we could take the square root of each of those separately, so on and so forth. Ultimately, what that leads me to doing is this. I'm going to take the square root of just 144, and because it's negative, I'm going to put an I after it. Okay? What I'm really doing is this. The square root of negative 144 is the same as the square root of 144 times negative 1, which is the same as the square root of 144 times the square root of negative 1. The square root of 144 is 12. The square root of negative 1 is I. So this becomes 10 plus or minus 12I. Now the other thing is, I was writing it as all over one divisor, or one denominator, excuse me. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to write this as 10 over 2 and 12 over 2, and then I'm going to put the I behind that all. So what I get is x equals whatever happens when I divide this out. So 10 divided by 2 is 5 plus or minus. 12 divided by 2 is 6, and don't forget the I. So x equals 5 plus or minus 6i, and there you go.